very good. Isn't it funny, for a load of awake, sovereign individuals, you're remarkably obedient and you're all back on time. I can't tell you what to do. I wouldn't dream of it. It just shows how much the collective consciousness of the day wants us all to be together for our next speaker. Just to reiterate how important events like these are, and we all know that. I mean, I'm sure many of you went on freedom rallies and have made your presence felt outside many politicians' homes and schools and all kinds of things, maybe even on roundabouts or with yellow boards. It's the collective activity that does count. And on that note, there's another event here I'd just quickly like to publicise, and I'd like to ask Christabel Bell, just stand up. It's her event. And it will be, let's give her a round of applause. Many of you may have already been to Tisbury, Victoria Hall in Tisbury. It's a different
hall from the one that I've normally done. It's in the higher up in the village opposite the garage. We're just trying it once. We're probably going back to the other one next time.
Okay, well, it's a kind of different hall, but it's in Tisbury, which I know has been the site of many gatherings. And on Sunday, the 20th of October, Christabel Bell, as she's known to many, is putting on an event with Meg Smith, Liberating Hemp for the Way Forward. Andrew Knott, Devices to Save Fuel and Cut Pollution. Andrew's here today. I know that his book, Fuelspiracy, is in the bookshop. John Briggs, Alice and the Money Tree, his new book. Professor Gloria Moss, who I'm sure many of you are aware of, Revealing the Truth Using Critical Thinking. I think preaching to the choir if you go to that. Ray McLean, who's a retired lawyer, and that's all in one day, Victoria Hall in Tisbury on Sunday the 20th. And I think it's just testament to how many of us have decided to change our lives, as Charles Mallett was saying earlier, and do things for ourselves since the scamdemic, and think, no, we don't need anyone to tell us, we're just going to do it. We're going to stand up and we're going to become event organisers, we're going to become activists. Many of us wouldn't have dreamed of it a few years ago. So well done, Belle, and everybody like Belle and Rhonda and Jane, Project Libertas, who's doing these things. That's one more round of applause. Let's get the energy going this afternoon. So, on to our first speaker of this afternoon, our second speaker of the day. And normally I make notes, and because I'm middle-aged, I need glasses to look at the screen, I need glasses to look at my notes. But I'm going to take my glasses off because I don't need any notes for this next speaker, because I'm very proud to say that she is my friend. And I don't say that lightly about many people. I don't. I'm quite discerning. And as soon as I met this woman a few years ago, I just thought, wow, a woman in a man's world. Because the first time I ever saw Sandi, and plenty of people who were awake before me had said, oh, Sandi Adams. I'm like, who's Sandi Adams? And they're like, you don't know Sandi Adams? I'm like, I don't know Sandi Adams. How do you not know Sandi Adams? I don't know Sandi Adams. And the first I ever saw her at a freedom rally in Birmingham, speaking in 2020, the only woman on the stage at a freedom rally, with the Ikes and all kinds of good and great. She was the only woman, and she blew my head off. And I made a concerted effort to get to know her and found about the work she was doing. And to say trailblazer, again, it's not a word I would use lightly. But she was talking about Sandi, it's not she's not the cat's mother, she's Pagan's mother. To be talking about Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 way before the scamdemic, way before anyone in the UK was really raising it into the public consciousness. Sandi knew what it was about before any of us, I think, really understood what was coming and how intertwined it would end up being with the scamdemic and what happened. And Sandi was ridiculed. She left a very successful corporate life to pursue this work, and she's never stepped off the path. And I'm sure many of you here are familiar with that amazing work that she's done. The talk today is slightly different. It's moving on from the sustainable goals and all that means for us. It's about communitarianism. It's about, oh, I need my notes. No, hang on, I've got it. It's about continuing many of the themes that Charles Mallett spoke about, but going into them in more depth. And I just think she was a woman in a man's world. Many more women are stepping up now into the so-called alternative freedom movement, whatever we are. But Sandi was one of the first, and for that I'd like to thank you. And I'd like you all to put your hands together for our next speaker, the great Sandi Adams.
Thank you, Gemma. Does this work? Can you hear me? Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah, thanks so much, Gemma. That's really very sweet of you. And yeah.
To get close to the mic, Sandi.
Yeah. Is that better? Yeah. Oh gosh, it's not. I have to be quite close. Right. Okay. I mean, we've come a long way since 2020, and thanks to all the people that come together in these meetings, and Christabel doing the amazing work in Tisbury, and I'm doing a talk in Swiss Cottage on which John is involved in, on the 8th of November. And it's bringing us all together to actually have this common ground, and it's so important that we really know what's coming and what's going on. And those that are familiar with my work know that I've really been doing a deep dive into the United Nations. I'm not going to be spending too much time on that this morning, except that communitarianism is an ideology. It actually has a name. It's been brought through with European communitarian law from the EU. It's actually encoded now in statute within the UK, but nobody uses the word. The people that have instituted it do not use that word, communitarianism, and that's very interesting. It is basically Fabian socialism on steroids, and and I'm going to be talking about the Fabian Society and how all of that, it was incepted in, I think it was 1884 in London, and it's now sort of worldwide, and how that has really given birth to this huge communitarian thing. But it was also a big thing in Columbia University from the 1930s with the technocracy movement, and Columbia University was a hotbed really of communitarian and Fabian socialism thinking. And I'm just going to sort of really, I mean, this is what they want from, they want us to own nothing and be happy. This is about really communitarianism is a means to divest people of their property and for us to own nothing and not be happy. So so I'm going to try and romp through this. I mean, I'm going to start with the technocracy movement of the 1930s very quickly for those that don't know about it. But it was a movement after the 1930s in the Depression, and it was led by political scientists. Now, political scientism really at that time was all about communitarianism and Fabian socialism. After the Depression of the 1930s in America, this political sort of movement started up called the technocracy movement, and it was led by scientists and engineers. Particularly, there was one called M.K. Hubbard and Howard Scott, and they were both students at Columbia University. And they proposed a replacement of capitalism with an energy-based economy as opposed to a price-based economy. A bit like what is happening now with the carbon, the whole carbon economy that they're trying to bring in. And it was reintroduced by the Trilateral Commission, Zbigniew-Brzezinski, in 1973 as a new economic order. Now, Gordon Brown spoke about this as well. Many alumni of Columbia are heading up the present agenda, sort of communitarian agenda. And all of this is a sort of an elite group of technocrats who are trying to implement what was then global warming to create a new carbon-based economy. I'm going to romp through these because obviously you've got the Club of Rome. Again, that was another Fabian socialist organisation. They're a crisis think tank for the United Nations and it's problem, reaction, solution, which is actually the communitarian thing of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. So it's about creating a problem, having a reaction, and then the solution. They've always got the solution at the end of it. And this is how, the Cove thing was the same playbook. So anyway, it was the Rockefeller Foundation that formed the Club of Rome. It was by Aurelio Pecci. He was an Italian industrialist, and this was in 1968 at the Rockefeller's private estate in Bellagio in Italy. Global problems require global solutions, and then they brought it from global to local. And this is what the community is all about. They're very big on community, but only if they can control it. We don't have to go along with that playbook. We can have our communities and not have the top-down control. And this is what we have to be aware of, because an awful lot of people say, oh, we've got to find solutions. And even in my own hometown and this town and other places, they don't really understand what a problem is. So they can't come up with a solution because they're buying into a lot of communitarian thinking. And that's perfectly kind of, it's okay because they don't know what communitarianism really means, and I'm going to try and explain it today. So then, various Club of Rome reports came out. All of them were really following the communitarian agenda. I mean, communitarianism is all about, it's about depopulation and sort of technocracy, really, a sort of a technocracy that will, scientific dictatorship. And Limits to Growth was the first Club of Rome report. That talked about depopulation and population control. Then we had Our Common Future. This is really the communitarian playbook, which is all about equality over economics throughout Europe, and funding third world countries at the expense of Europe. And then these Club of Rome reports were Limits to Growth was the 1970s, Our Common Future was 1987, and then the final one was just before the Earth Summit, which was all about really how they invented the whole global warming issue, because what they said was they were chucking around ideas in this think tank, this Club of Rome think tank. These are all commissioned by the UN through the Club of Rome. This one was called the First Global Revolution, and there that they identified that they would use climate change in order to get the control that they needed to make the scapegoat humanity. They actually said the enemy of humanity is humanity itself, at the end, on I think it's page 115 of the First Global Revolution. So they identified us as the enemy, and that's the problem, is that that's what they do. They try and turn it all around. It's like an inversion. And so that gave birth to, obviously, Agenda 21, which was launched at the Earth Summit. I'm just going quickly through this because it all relates to the stuff that I'm talking about. It really seeks to divide man from nature and to implement a top-down control of humanity. And it's there to control every resource on our planet. Every resource is to be owned by them and controlled by them and managed. It was a management and control system of the entire planet, Agenda 21. And that, the guy that brought it on was this chap, Maurice Strong, along obviously with many, many others. He was the Secretary General of the United Nations at the time. And that was that's what he said: I'm a socialist in ideology and a capitalist in methodology. That is classic communitarian, because it's if you like, it's a way of controlling everything via corporations. So it's capitalist in its thinking, but in its methodology, it's actually capitalist in methodology, but in its ideology, it's socialist or communist. Now, he was quite an interesting person because he ended up being sort of he was exiled to China in the 1990s, early 90s. No, it must have been after that, 1997, something like that, because he got involved in the oil for food scandal. He was a total crook. He was an oil billionaire himself. He worked for the Rockefellers, and he ended up ending his days in China. He was a friend of Mao Zedong, and he was a thoroughly. He worked with Adnan Khashoggi, and he had to literally run away to China and end his days there, which he loved. He loved the Chinese system. So you move on, and then obviously Agenda 21 wasn't moving fast enough, so they turned it into Agenda 2030, which was really just a deadline. And this was done really in the last week of September 2015. The Pope Francis met with President Obama to make his keynote speech to the UN General Assembly on the future of the world and to unveil Agenda 2030. They launched the 17 goals there, which is all part of the communitarian Fabian socialist agenda. They wanted the goals to be achieved by 2030. And really, it was a way of the Catholic Church sort of endorsing these goals, which is quite extraordinary, really, because they are the goals. These goals will destroy everything that we hold dear. So, and it's the promotion of the secular sort of New Age ideology, climate change, and the technocratic AI agenda. So that's what the Pope's endorsed. So here we are, there's 17 goals, and I'm only going to go through 2 of them before I really start off, because all of it is inversion. If you look at the 17 goals, they sound really nice, really fluffy, really good, but they're not. These goals were accelerated by the pandemic and as a vector to bring in the New World Order. They sound very worthy and good, but behind the sugar-coated words is a plan for ownership of all the world's resources and to control humanity in a global panopticon of surveillance and geofencing. I've got a few examples here. I mean, really, it's a death cult. It's dressing evil up as benevolence. So it's, if you look at them, this is goal 1 and goal 2. I'm only going to go through 2, so you can just see what they mean. Right. Goal 1 is no poverty. I mean, that's a massive ask, really, in a world that we have, and 0 hunger. So I'm going to look at goal number 1. This is what they say: poverty alleviation and social protection. The UN solution is AI-enabled digital footprint for credit, mobile money access, blockchain identity solutions to enable economic identities for all. But the reality is make everyone equally poor. UBI for all with a fixed amount of carbon credits, analysis of social credit through digital footprint, Facebook, Twitter, etc. Collect data about individuals' habits, behaviours, skills, as used in the Zima Chinese credit system. Because at the end of the day, all this is about data. Data is the new gold, it's the new oil, and there's big, big companies there to seize your data. And this is what it's all about. It's about setting up a whole new oligarchy. And it's not to help the poor at all, or the hungry. Now, end all hunger. The UN say access to food for all, improve nutrition and food production security. But the reality is real food is replaced with synthetic lab food. GMO mass-produced food production, synthetic proteins, insect proteins, synthetic 3D printed meats, your consumption habits recorded on the blockchain, monitoring sensors in waste bins, storage units and refrigerators, and your data sold to third parties. So I'm looking at the Sustainable Development Goals, and this is the 3 E's of sustainable development. They call it social equity, which the individual gives up personal rights for the needs of the community. This is communitarianism. Economic prosperity, free market replaced by public-private partnerships, international wealth transfer. And then you've got the ecological integrity, individual rights subordinated to environmental needs. And this is what we're seeing now. It's also about human computation and the brain economy. This is the Bloomberg surveillance, and they've set up infrastructure in schools in America, and it's happening here as well, where children are being monitored through the devices that they're using, and they're able to actually record the children's emotions in all of this. And I've just sort of written some notes here. Sustainable development is a program to manipulate your brain to ensure that you're a good global citizen and a productive worker. This is what they're doing through devices. This is how Julian Romanello in America put an amazing post on Facebook today, a few days ago about the brain economy and how they really want to be able to monitor everybody's emotions as well as anything else through their devices. And those whose brains have not been developed for sustainability are a burden on the system and are not worth the cost they inflict on the collective. Your brain will be monitored and managed everywhere, and all the time your diet of information will be controlled for quality assurance purposes and their purposes. So they're calling it brain care scoring. I mean, have a look at Julian Romanello's work, because this is actually quite an important part of the mind control, because ultimately what they want to create is a complicit and controlled global citizenship. And anyone that deviates from that control, anyone that speaks out against the system, a bit like in 1984, if you speak out, you're punished, and your score, your credit score will be brought down. This is what they're aiming at, and we have to be aware of this in order to do something about it. I don't want to scare people, but on the other hand, we can't deal with the problem unless we know. We can't deal with the solution unless we know the problem. So, yeah, you have to be in service to the Sustainable Development Goals. You must sacrifice your brain on the altar of collective prosperity. And it's not just your brain, it's everything. It's your land, it's your home, it's everything. You know, we're being monitored with all our energy. The land is being monitored with biodiversity net gain, financial instruments, which I'll be going into later. So they want to monitor every aspect of us as human beings, including our brains. So I'm just going to go into what communitarianism is. It's balancing the rights and responsibilities of the community. It stresses that individuals have not only rights, but also responsibilities towards their communities. It argues that liberal societies have become too focused on protecting individual rights without considering the social obligations individuals have. Social solidarity and civic virtue. The communitarians emphasize the importance of solidarity, mutual responsibility, and civic engagement. They argue that a healthy society is one where citizens actively participate in community life and contribute to the common good. Sounds all very nice, doesn't it? Communitarians argue that individuals are shaped by their cultural, historical, and social contexts rather than being autonomous, self-made individuals. People are deeply embedded in communities that give meaning to their lives. Now, that sounds all very good. But then, the person who was behind a lot of this ideology was Amartya Etzioni. He was professor of sociology at Columbia University from 1958 to 1973. His ideology promoted he was a German-born Israeli professor of sociology from 1929 to, I think he was born in 29. And he brought communitarianism into certainly the UK in the 1990s. Tony Blair is a great advocate of this. He argued for a carefully crafted balance between individual rights, balance between the social responsibilities of the community. Individual rights are replaced with the rights of the community, which are vaguely defined. Laws protecting the individual are outmoded and must be balanced by experts against the sensibilities of a global market, trade agreements, tariffs, constitutions, and religious freedoms. All these identified as barriers to achieving sustainable development. Tony Blair called this the third way because it's the middle way, or so they say, between capitalism and communism. That's why they call it the middle way. But actually, it's fundamentally a communist system. David Cameron used to call it big society. Communitarians are global thinkers, movers and shakers. They seek to destroy representational government, voting, private property ownership, and promote regionalisation and devolution. There was a really good manifesto written by a lady in America called Niki Rapana. I should have put a slide up about her. N-I-K-I, Rapana is R-A-A-P-A-N-A, and her daughter, Nordica Friedrich. Sadly, Niki died in 2020. She lived very simply in a yurt, literally in Alaska. And unfortunately, but she passed away, but she and her daughter wrote Our Common Destiny, it was published in 2020. And it's the Anti-Communitarian Manifesto. And she's gone very deeply, she's almost like a PhD in this ideology. And I have read it, but it's quite in depth. But if you do want to do a deep dive into communitarianism and how we got here, then do read Niki Rapana's work. Really, communitarianism is the Hegelian dialect. It's capitalism is the thesis, the problem. And then you've got communism, which is the antithesis, the reaction. And then you've got communitarianism as the thesis, the solution. Now, as I say, the people that push this never call it communitarianism, which is why we have to be aware of it and how it works within our communities and how people have been infiltrating, NGOs have infiltrated communities to put this through. It's a bit like common purpose. So what it really is tyranny with a very smiley face. You've got political correctness, you've got techno-slavery, convergence theory, this is converging all the AI and everything together, human computation, where you've got wearable and trackable things that you wear and sort of syncing up with the Internet of Bodies. It's all embedded with the whole AI and literally the whole thing about us being good global citizens and doing as we're told. Collaborative governance, they talk about that. Collectivism, resource asset management, where all our resources have to be managed. And yes, we know that, but is it for the greater good or is it for corporate profit? And this is where we have to really look at it, because behind this is a great corporate machine making lots of money. It's an oligarchy making lots of money out of waste management. We're told we have to recycle, we've got to do this, that and the other. Yes, we're doing it because we're good people. All of us in here are good people. And good people do good things, but there is a massive machine behind all this trying to turn it into a whole economy which isn't actually serving us. Resource asset management, social contracts, snitching, in the community, where you've got the curtains twitching to see if you've got chickens in your garden and things like that. And we noticed this during COVID, didn't we? When, people would snitch on each other. Your family, your friends, your neighbours could snitch on you for not conforming to the rules. And this is the kind of environment that this is creating. And I think it can only get worse the way the legislation's going. So you've got social credit systems. Now, what is the a lot of it is it has its roots in Fabian socialism. The Fabian Society was founded in London in 1884. The UK Charter, it was chartered by the Crown with the purpose of ushering in a one world collectivist power through gradualism. Their whole thing is doing things incrementally so that nobody really notices. So they use that, they use gradualism versus violent revolution. They don't want revolution. They just want they wear you down. They literally sort of wear you down until you give in. Their logo is a wolf in sheep's clothing with a turtle which says, "When I strike hard." And I think Starmer's striking hard right now. I think they've got to the point now, since 1884, they've been bringing in this gradualism, and this is how they're moving forward now. With it's the right climate right now to bring in the striking hard bit. There's about 43 members of our current Labour government are Fabians. The name Fabian came from the Roman general Fabius, who used carefully planned strategies to wear down his enemy over an extended period of time. Now that is exactly the way they operate. Now, Tony Blair is a Fabian, as is Gordon Brown, and this is the Fabian window. I'll explain that later. But famous Fabians are H.G. Wells, George Bernard Shaw, Sidney Webb, Beatrice Webb, Annie Besant, William Wallace. And these two men, Gordon Brown and Tony Blair, they did more to destroy the British Constitution and national sovereignty in the 1990s by bringing in EU communitarian statute law to override English constitutional common law, such as the Magna Carta and the Bill of Rights. They removed the legalities put in place to prevent regimes such as Nazism and communism to take a stronghold. They incorporated the UN Charter and the European Court of Human Rights, which is an inversion because it protects the rights of minorities in the UK, but fails to protect the majority, effectively reversing the democratic majority rule. And that's what I think Charles was saying about the Human Rights Bill. Is really, it's not worth the paper it's written on, because it doesn't protect us, it protects the minorities. And that should not be the way. It's a total inversion. Yeah, this is the Fabian window. So let's have another look at it. It's a stained glass window that Tony Blair was standing underneath. It was designed by George Bernard Shaw in 1910 as a commemoration of the Fabian Society. 4 Fabians, Beatrice and Sidney Webb and Graham Wallace, they founded the London School of Economics with the money left to them by the Fabian Society by Henry Hutchinson. It's actually, you've got the wolf in sheep's clothing, the emblem. You can't see it very well on here. But we see 2 men who are Fabian members, Sidney Webb and Edward R. Peace, and others helping to build the New World Order by hammering metal on an anvil. So they're shaping the new world. This is what they're kind of trying to portray in this classic stained glass window, because they are the people who are going to form this new world order. Sorry?
Just a very quick question. I know I'm not supposed to ask it.
Yeah.
But what is the relationship, if there is one, between the Fabian Society and the Freemasons?
And the Freemasons.
Is there any?
It's difficult, to find that tangible connection. I mean, I don't know that. I wish I did know that answer, because the Freemasons have an immense amount of power, and so does the Fabian Society, and it wouldn't surprise me. A lot of them are involved in things like the Trilateral Commission and all those shady organisations. They've all got a link with each other. It's an old boys network, and it's a club, and we're not in it, basically. So it doesn't really matter whether there is a link or not. They work the same way, and they're there, really trying to shape this new world order. They've been trying to do. What's really good is that they've been trying to do this for such a long time and never succeeded. So that is a really, that's heartening, because at the moment I feel they're absolutely desperate, and they're not succeeding, although the infrastructure is all in place for them to succeed. And it's up to us. It's up to us for it not to happen. And that's why we need a critical mass of people to actually get that going. Now, this is how, feudal, because we're living under a feudal system at the moment. So in the medieval times, you had the monarchies. Now we've got the central bankers. You had the landed gentry, and now we've got the big bad banks. You had the clergy, which is the corporate elite now. Royal ministers, elected officials, presidents, MPs, representatives. You had the merchant classes, and now you've got top bureaucrats and oligarchs. Vassals, top professionals, doctors, entertainers, clergy, all the people that literally followed all the rules, And then, of course, we've got everyone else, which is us, and we're right at the bottom of that pile. So this is really how the whole communitarian feudal system can work, this new feudal system that we're living under. So the conclusion that I've come to is, from a skeptic's viewpoint, communitarianism, especially when combined with the technologies of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, could pave the way for a highly controlled, centralised and authoritarian world, while framed as a system for the common good. It could ultimately lead to surveillance over personal lives, restricted freedoms through economic control, top-down governance with limited democratic input, the erosion of individual rights in favour of communal goals. The communitarian, I can barely say it, it's got so many syllables. Communitarianism could give rise to a dystopian future where personal freedoms are sacrificed in the name of sustainability and social cohesion. With carbon credits potentially replacing cash as a tool for controlling individual behaviour and economic activity, the question will be whether societies can balance communal goals with personal liberty, or whether we can end up trading personal freedom for security and environmental responsibility. Now, how do we temper that? We all want a really lovely world. We need to look after our world. But they don't care about that because they don't care about us. They feel that they have dominion over this earth and they kind of don't want us around. So this is the way that they're behaving, is that they're putting everything as an inversion. So we are the ones to blame for planet Earth's demise, even though the big corporations are the ones that have destroyed our world. And this is what I can never get with that mad lot that Charles was talking about, who they started here, the Extinction Rebellion, because they are supporting this whole thing. You know, they think they're saving the planet, but they're supporting 5G. They're supporting all the technocracy that's coming in to control our world. So I can only think that it was set up by people who know exactly what they're doing, and it's just to try and make people feel guilty, to really try and make us feel guilty for standing up against the technocracy. So yeah, you're standing up against all this stuff that's going to save our world. Well, it's not. There's no way that technocracy and the corporations are going to be saving our world. So yeah, I saw, because I did read 1984 not that long ago actually, and I saw a real distinct kind of parallel between the ministry. You've got the ministry in 1984. I don't know. Has anybody read it? Anybody read it? Yeah. Basically, this is George Orwell, and he had links to the Fabians. So I still can't find out whether he was really one or not. But he certainly knew the Huxleys, and they were in the Fabian Society. You've got the Ministry of Peace, which concerns itself with war, and you've got the Ministry of Truth, which concerns itself with lies. The Ministry of Love, with torture. And the Ministry of Plenty with starvation. So everything was inverted, every single thing about the Ministry of Truth, the Ministry of Love, all of that was inverted. And, in 1984, England, I think it's England, it's Oceania, is this place where everything is technocratically controlled. And they've got these ministries that monitor everybody to make sure they're doing the right thing. And the Ministry of Truth is really pushing out lies if you don't actually adhere to them. And the protagonist in it, I can't remember his name now, but anyway, he goes against it and gets tortured in the Ministry of Love, which is interesting. These contradictions are not accidental, nor do they result from ordinary hypocrisy. They are deliberate exercises in doublethink. And I really think that we are in that whole thing about doublethink and newspeak, because what is true is lies, and all that stuff. What they say is truth is lies. Everything is inverted. So I do believe that these books like Brave New World that Charles mentioned and 1984 they're not fiction. It's almost like a manual of what they're going to do. So I think, if you haven't read 1984, read it, because they had 3-party slogans: war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. So, yeah, everything is a horrible inversion. Now, I want to sort of really look at community policing, because there's a lot of weird stuff going on. I mean, I listened to John Wedger, the ex-detective, speaking to Tony Gosling on a podcast the other day. And I've got to speak to him. I haven't had time to get in touch with him. I've got his number and everything. But he was talking about how, isn't it extraordinary that our police force is being destroyed? And that we used to have something like 1,700 police stations in the UK, and now it's down to 500 and diminishing. Which is a real problem, because police aren't doing what they're supposed to do, because they're being told to do other stuff. And that's exactly what Charles was speaking about. So I did look at the goals of community policing. Establish officers' relationship with community. Have community look after itself. Prevent crime. Well, what kind of crime? Hate crime? Address, reduce fear of crime. How do you do that? I don't know. Raise awareness of community policing. Educate public about community policing. Elicit citizen involvement. Create problem solving. Create active cooperation with employers and residents. Now, unfortunately, the idea that communities police themselves with minimal physical policing, this is what they want. They want us all to be policing ourselves with the help of AI, with surveillance. And they want us all snitching on one another. And it's like a Stasi. I mean, you remember what the Stasi was all about. And this is an ideology where everybody is indoctrinated into being the perfect global citizen. You have to obey and you have to adhere to their rules. Any deviation from their rules is seen as an abomination, and that you need to be pulled back into line. And this is what community policing is all about, I'm afraid. So the physical policing goes, and it's put into a minimum. And the indoctrination with mainstream media, training programs and institutions, corporations and schools is designed to make everyone a good global citizen, willing to stamp out any dissenting voices within the community. The police will be aided with AI surveillance technology, social media to keep an eye on communities. I don't know if any of you subscribe to something called Neighbour. Is it Good Neighbour or something? There's these Next Door, that's it. Now, I've noticed that there's that's what that's been created for. It's a CIA involvement. It's really, really pernicious. And I've noticed that on there, they're always talking about community policing. So, and I do look at it because sometimes I want a plumber or it's very useful, isn't it? But it's a CIA construct. So we really do have to look at this. It's designed to make everyone a good global citizen, willing to stamp out any dissenting voice. Sorry, I've said that. People will be encouraged to snitch on their families, friends, and neighbours for the greater good. The greater good. It's terrible that our police force are literally, being sent to people's homes to arrest them for a Facebook post. Unbelievable, Anyone concerned about criminal justice in Britain will find the well-documented, this whole thing about 1,700 prisoners given early release around the country in the last few weeks. It's galling. As domestic abusers and career criminals walk free, many will have been struck by the contrast of the government's response to riots with calls of two-tier care, because that's exactly what we've got. We've got a two-tier policing system. Many of those leaving prison will be effectively swapping places with those arrested last month in the disturbances following the barbaric Southport attack. While some of those locked up were violent rioters, others were merely those who've said unpleasant things on Facebook and elsewhere on social media. I mean, there was that grandmother, yes, she said something pretty awful on Facebook, but it was the first Facebook post she'd ever posted. She had to get somebody to actually show her how to do it. I think her name was Julie Sweeney. She's been given 15 months for a single crass Facebook post. Then came the question, does the Prime Minister understand that there's a growing feeling of anger in this country? Because we're seeing this. People are getting angry. Do they want dissent? Is that what they're trying to push us into? Or do we box clever and do it a different way? Because I think if we fall into civil disobedience, they will come down on us hard. And that's what they want. They're doing this deliberately. So we need to really be clever and strategic about the way that we oppose all this. I'm sorry, I'm being filmed. I'll probably be in jail next week, but anyway. Anyway, this whole thing about communitarianism, it really does make you realise that there is this concerted effort to really get us into that position. It's like brain training. It's the whole behavioural insights team that the cabinet used, during COVID. We've got these, and the psychology, as that gentleman mentioned before, it's a psychology of making people behave a certain way. And we've got to be aware that this nudging and all of this stuff is a psychological means to get us to really toe the line and become the perfect global citizens. And what I've noticed, even in this community, there was a group who tried to stop this event yesterday. I don't know whether many of you know about it. But, there's people in my constituent, where I live. But it's the same thing. They are trying to shut down free speech, freedom of speech. This is really, with no free speech, we have no freedom. And unfortunately, I got the call yesterday from Rhonda saying that this group had called me all sorts of things. And that they needed to speak to the guy that owns this place to have it shut down. And I rebutted it with a very firm letter saying I will take legal action against you for defaming my name. And I haven't heard a thing since. I think we need to stand up to those bullies, because this is what we're going to be. We're going to be, put under this. And, the thing is that so many people in these communities, they do want solutions, but you can't get solutions until you know who the enemy is, until you know what the problem is. And so many people don't understand what the problem is. And this is why we're here. We're telling people what the problem is and how we all want really a fabulous community. And we do need to work in community, but it's understanding that it's not from top down. It's us, and it's within us. And as Gemma was saying, it's making those decisions and understanding what is top-down community involvement and what isn't. And I think that is the biggest challenge right now, because all of this is coming into our communities, this community policing, this encouraging people to snitch on each other, and the whole thing with the chickens and everything. It's unbelievable, really, what they're trying to do. I just wanted to say, because I'm going to be I'm going to leave communitarianism there, but I've done a bit of work on the Summit of the Future, but how it relates to what happened in 2020 and 2019, because this particular meeting happened in the United Nations in 2019, and it was to accelerate the 17 goals of Agenda 2030, because they weren't moving fast enough, because they keep failing to implement all this stuff. And so they obviously it was brought about in 2015. So then you had, obviously, to 2019, nothing much had happened. So Antonio Guterres got together with Klaus Schwab and people in the United Nations, and they called it the UN Forum Partnership Agreement, and it was signed in Geneva between Antonio Guterres and Klaus Schwab in June 2019 to accelerate the goals. The UN Forum Partnership was signed in a meeting that was held at the headquarters in Geneva between these bodies, the World Economic Forum and the UN. And Klaus Schwab needed to accelerate the agenda for sustainable development. Now, the partnership, this document identified 6 areas of focus. It was financing Agenda 2030, climate change, health, digital cooperation. Now, remember that one. Digital cooperation, gender equality and empowerment of women, education and skills to strengthen and broaden their combined impact by building on existing and new collaborations. Now, digital cooperation to meet the needs of the 4th Industrial Revolution, while seeking to advance global analysis and standards for digital governance and digital inclusiveness. Now, this is where, the whole fluffy kumbaya stuff comes in. It's DEI, it's that whole thing of bringing people together under diversity, equity, and inclusion. And The trouble is that what happened then, literally 4 months later, because they had to get digital cooperation. That was put in all of that, but that was the most important thing. Because in 4 months later, in November 2019, they held Event 201 at with Bill and Melinda Gates as well, at the Johns Hopkins facility in New York. And it was a tabletop exercise, a what if a novel coronavirus escaped from a wet market in Brazil, and how would we deal with it? How would we get this dealt with? And of course, the Gates Foundation were there with the answer, because they'd already made the vaccines at the patented at the Pirbright Institute 8 years earlier. We know that it was all a setup. And so this was the way they got and this is the way they got their digital cooperation, because Klaus Schwab, he's very, very open about it. The pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world. So that's what happened, literally. It was his wet dream, basically. And during the lockdowns, while we were kept inside, while we were sleeping, the infrastructure was put in place for increased cashless transactions, ULEZ, 15-minute cities in Oxford, Canterbury and Cambridge, LED lampposts, surveillance cameras, supermarket biometrics went in, self-service tills, heightened surveillance. The digital cooperation was forced on us. And this is at the start of a 10-year transition. And they're transitioning us from one economic and political system to another. They're transitioning us right now from shareholder capitalism, free market economy, shareholder capitalism, into stakeholder capitalism, which is a totally different ball game. Klaus Schwab describes it in his book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution. These books are a must-read if you want to understand the intentions of the WEF and the United Nations. He describes this 10-year transition, but now it's only 5 years, because we've had 5 years gone. And if you really want to get a handle of it, a guy has made a film, and I think it's still out there, and it's called Stakeholder Communism. And it's really about this new political and an economic system that we haven't asked for this. We haven't actually we haven't voted for this, and yet it's being done to us. And it's all about stakeholders being in charge, NGOs, big bad banks, corporations actually running the show. So do look at Richard Jeff's film, because he explains it, because Klaus Schwab has actually been very open about what stakeholder communism, capitalism is all about, because it's nothing to do with a free market economy or a price-based economy. And it's forcing us really into the whole carbon credit thing, but all the jobs taken over by AI. And so it's a scoring system, it's tokenization, it's everything that we don't want and we haven't asked for. That's just facial recognition, we know all about that. Geofencing and climate lockdowns, the thing is that, if we allow this to continue, I think the 15-minute cities are still rolling in Oxford and Canterbury and places like that, and it's caused absolute chaos. And there's this guy called Jeff Buys Cars, and this made me laugh the other day. Anybody know Jeff? He's bloody brilliant, isn't he? Anyway, he put this post up the other day that he went to he went to take his he didn't do it. A friend of his turned up and said, "Look, I want to sell my electric car." And Jeff said, "Well, why do you want to sell it? You haven't had it that long." And he said, "Oh, I took it into the garage for a service," and he said, "I picked it up, and they said they'd give it a technological upgrade, a free one." And I thought, "Oh, great, lovely, technological upgrade, free." He said, but then he had to wait for his wife or something. She was in the hairdressers, and he read the small print, and he realised that actually the car had been fitted with. He was bored, and he read the terms and conditions to find that his Hyundai Kona had been fitted with geofencing and geo-timing capabilities. it said this faculty must not be used without consent unless, by law, which negates the former, it allows geofencing to allow his car to be remotely controlled and shut down on command by government. They're preparing us for climate lockdowns in line with 15-minute city agenda, which is the C40 cities. So, so geofencing is real. You know, it's where your car can't go past a certain area, if you've got one of those silly cars. But, you know, this is it. Not all of us are going to be doing, you know, they can only make this work if you go in with, you know, if you buy into the technology. And I think it's going to fail massively. I think all of this is going to fail because they're revealing themselves, these people. They're revealing their awful plans. And people are waking up going, hang on, that's not right. That's not right. I'm not going to do that. So it is quite interesting what they're doing. And then we've got, you know, the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. Now, a lot of our local councils are coming together and they're becoming unitary. And that is kind of the long-term aim of that. They say, oh, it's better for you because you get more of a say. But that can be taken away. And the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy are very powerful. They're called directly elected mayors. Some of them are directly elected, but you know, they're in Westminster, put it that way. They're in Westminster and they want to have more power than our Parliament. And that's what people I don't think politicians even understand what the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy is all about, because all of it, they will have the power to bring climate lockdowns if we don't oppose it. Because they are immensely powerful and more powerful than our government will be. Because at the moment we know that, you know, we had the, you know, can't be bothered to bloody well vote election just gone. You know, we know that none of them, they're all singing from the WEF hymn book. We know that. And this is what is coming into our Parliament, is that it will be governed by the Ministry of whatever it is, the Ministry of Truth, the Ministry of, I don't know, but it's not our constitutional government, the ones that we have elected. So this Global Covenant of Mayors, do look into it. I'm going to give Andrew, I've got a big document about it. I'm going to give it, please remind me, Andrew, because it's important that we really know what it really means, because a lot of people haven't looked at it. And you know, they're unelected by the people. Well, I don't know, you had a different opinion to that, but this will result in you as an individual being taken away from the decision-making process in your council. They're governed by the C40 Cities Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, and this has not been put together to give us more of a say. It's the other way round. Mayors might make climate commitments without fully consulting the public, leading to a democratic deficit and limited public input on important policies. The non-binding nature of the covenant will lead to greenwashing, where cities make lofty promises and accumulate revenue and penalties for failure to comply. The economic impacts, climate policies can impose financial burdens on businesses and residents, potentially leading to job losses, higher costs and disruption to local economies. Unintended consequences, rapid transition to renewable energy and climate measures could harm local economies or lead to energy instability. We know all this. You know, the whole thing is nonsense. It doesn't make sense. The whole net zero does not make sense. And I've gone into that enough in the past, but local governments may adopt top-down climate policies driven by global institutions, ignoring local needs and realities. There's ideological concerns. Critics may see climate policies as a vehicle for advancing broader political or ideological agendas, exaggerating climate risks and pushing centralisation. It creates poverty. Climate policies could disproportionately impact low-income and marginalised groups while benefiting wealthier individuals. And there's a narrow focus on emissions, you know, overemphasis on reducing CO2 emissions to stop freedom movement or pay per mile and climate lockdowns. You know, Pay per mile is something that is real. They're going to try and implement that, get rid of car tax and get us to pay per mile. How would that impact somebody that has quite a low car tax? At the moment, people have, there are some people that have ULEZ compliant cars. They may pay £30, £34 a month, a year for their car tax. But you then, if they've got commitments, they might have elderly parents, way in another town, or they might have. All of this is going to impact people's livelihoods. So anyway, that's enough about C40 cities. I'm sure you're all aware of the Absolute Zero document, because I've been banging on about that for ages, about do have a look at that. The UK Fire's Absolute Zero document, because forget, net zero, they're going for absolute zero. Now, another way of the communitarian agenda being really forced on us is through the environmental and social governance contracts that every business in the UK will have to adhere to. And this is all about its businesses will be under scrutiny to conform to the ESGs. This will cost them and will emerge as a climate tax on every business in the UK. ESG force companies to adopt stakeholder capitalism, basically, because it's you will be your score, your ESG score, which is your environment and social governance score, can be downmarked if you're not exercising diversity, equality and inclusion within your business. Are your employees cycling to work? So you're responsible for their emissions output. Are you recycling and conforming to eco-regulations? Are you using clean technology? Are you using sustainable products? Is your workplace safe? You're going to have a whole load of people with clipboards coming around and scoring you on whether you're fit to be running your business, for the greater good of the Sustainable Development Goals. This is just like unbelievable. Now, this is happening right now. It's not something in the future. And this is another thing that's happening right now, is the natural asset corporations, the financialisation of nature. In 2023, a new financial instrument was created by the Securities and Exchange Commission at the request of the New York Stock Exchange. Natural asset companies, natural asset classes, or natural asset corporations are based on environmental stewardship. NACs, natural asset corporations, hold the rights to ecological performance. So if you have land, you may own it, but it will be controlled by your biodiversity net gain, by NGOs that will come and score you on your biodiversity net gain. Whether you are adhering to their version of stewardship of the land. So these companies will be given a license to control the land. Sorry, I've gone into the next one. These companies would be given the license to control lands, both public and private, and will be required not to conduct any, you mustn't conduct any unsustainable activities, such as meat production or dairy farming, that lead to the degradation of the ecosystems, so they say. So these companies would somehow seek to profit from land without using the land. Whatever they do, it must be sustainable. This is how the public-private partnerships work. How does a company take control of land and make it profitable while not using it? It's confusing. They profit from the ecological performance, such as conservation, restoration, or sustainable management. The NACs would quantify and monetize these natural outputs using a system called Biodiversity Net Gain, or BNG. There's always an acronym. It's a bit like using the air that you breathe or any resource as a crypto or fiat currency. These natural assets that would normally belong to all of us would now belong to corporations run by so-called environmental special interests. So it's effectively a tax on land ownership. And I've been talking to farmers all over the West Country. There's a really good bunch of farmers in Cornwall and Devon who are really fighting against all of these get rid of meat things, the sustainable farming incentives, because Most of the farmers who own substantial land have been given an ultimatum, basically. They did work with the Common Agricultural Policy, which was where they used to get their subsidies from, EU subsidies. And then they changed it to the sustainable farming incentives. And it gives them, I think, 4 years to stop doing anything that DEFRA feel is unsustainable, like dairy and lamb and beef production. So they've been encouraged to having their subsidies cut if they don't set up other things like solar farms or wind farms on their land, or giving it over to herbal leys is another thing, and setting up what they call sustainable businesses like glamping or whatever, anything but dairy, lamb and beef production. So this is how they're attacking our farmers. And it's quite interesting because also, whilst doing that, they're pushing a lot of the food production into the communities and incentivizing communities to do this. But then they will be, the communities are much easier to control with BNG. And so you'll end up with a whole lot of communities all literally just, will be living on vegetables. There won't be any dairy, there won't be any, and this is the whole playbook of cutting out things like meat and dairy from, and everybody going vegan. The whole pushing of the food growing into communities is another communitarian agenda, because either way they will control that land. You've got renewables before food. This is what our land is looking like, thousands of acres of good farmland going to waste, given over to renewables. And when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, no energy is created. The storage technology still hasn't been developed. Ed Miliband was forced to force the acceleration of renewable energy. He said it would decrease energy bills. Has that happened? No. This is it. It's all just, it's a whole industry of the thing is that these solar panels, you can't recycle them. If you have what do they call it? Sort of ice falling from the sky, hailstones, they break and the toxins leach into the land. They're a nightmare. They're a nightmare. And of course, what they really want is to force farmers out. And Sainsbury's have said this. They've got the Sainsbury's Future Food Report. Do look it up. It's very important. They've got plans to push all the farming onto the supermarkets, so everything is grown under LED lights, and they've got plans to have it from 2025 to 2050, and then on to 2169. And and even the head of Sainsbury's, the CEO, has said we want to get rid of farming. We will do it. And this is their idea. This is their idea of farming. This is their futuristic idea of farming. You've got 3D printed meat, and all these bugs over there, of course, and lots of jellyfish and seaweed proteins, and even labs out in space. That's 2169. Apparently, they've got plans. This is all. I think this is all a fairy tale. In 2169, we could start to see personal microchip plants becoming the norm, developed to store and analyse all the genetic health and situational data recorded from our bodies. So then they're sort of looking at all the data that they're getting from our devices about our health, and they're creating things like the planetary diet. This is again, C40 Cities planetary diet. Look at the Just Eat. What's it called? The Lancet, Eat Lancet diet, a planetary diet that is all vegan. It's all vegan, and it's processed meat. The kind of fake meat, which is really bad for you, highly processed food. Not good for us. Not good for us at all. Now, what else? Let's have a look. Yeah, with the report from the Secretary General, this is the United Nations, they had our common agenda in March 2024. And it says we have to question whether the ambitious goals outlined in the UN Our Common Agenda are realistic, doubting the effectiveness of multilateral efforts, the ability to enforce global agreements and the willingness of nations to sacrifice short-term gains for long-term benefits. You know, can they get away with this? You know, I just don't think they will. You know, you've got human rights and social justice, despite seemingly good intentions. I would argue that calls for human rights and social justice are unlikely to change the behaviour of authoritarian regimes, which often disregard international norms. This is what they're talking about. They're talking about, you know, youth and future generations. And then they're talking about global health and pandemic preparedness. They're even saying that they doubt whether people would actually conform again. I don't know. It was a very strange. Our common agenda was all about health, peace and security, and they're chucking all these ideas around. I think they're panicking, to be honest. And then they had the Summit of the Future, which is 22nd to 23rd, where they're really trying to force some kind of pact, some kind of agreement on us. And it really is. It's the Pact of the Future. It was in New York, 22nd of September. And this is what they said. The world leaders today adopted a pact for the future that includes a global digital compact and a declaration on future generations. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General, has said, we cannot create a future fit for our grandchildren with a system built by our grandparents. Well, I think the system built by our grandparents is a lot better than what we've got now. The pact covered a broad range of issues, including peace and security, sustainable development, climate change, digital cooperation, human rights, which aren't human rights, gender, youth and future generations, and the transformation of global governance on sustainable development, climate and financing for the development.
It's also interesting that they're calling it a pact and not a treaty.
Well, exactly.
There's a difference between those two and the legal.
Absolutely, that's a very good observation. Yeah, because a pact is really it's a lot tighter than a treaty, isn't it?
It's actually the other way around.
Ah.
The treaty is a lot tighter.
Right. I was going to ask. This is I wished I'd been able to ask Charles this. Yeah.
Kind of looser.
Ah, right.
So they can't be held up.
So they can't be held to account.
Have to have a vote of Parliament.
Ah, right. Okay. Okay, that's really interesting because I wasn't sure.
Because I came across that just recently. I thought, oh my goodness.
Yeah, on climate change, that they confirm they need to keep global temperatures, above the pre-industrial levels and to transition away from fossil fuels and energy systems. Digital cooperation. Here we go. The Global Digital Compact, annexed to the Pact, is the first comprehensive global framework for digital cooperation and AI governance. Now, that is a little bit worrying. At the heart of the Compact is a commitment to design, use, and govern technology. It's also the first global commitment to data governance, placing it on the UN agenda and requiring countries to take concrete actions by 2030. Then you've got youth and future generations, a commitment to more meaningful opportunities for young people to participate in the decisions that shape their lives. Human rights and gender, a strengthening of our work on human rights, gender equality, and the empowerment of women, and more DEI. So that's diversity, equity, and inclusion. You see, this is the word salad that they use, and it is a word salad. They're having action days, featured strong commitments to action by all stakeholders. You see, it's all shored up with the stakeholders. And as well as pledges of $1.5 billion US dollars to advance digital inclusion. So where's this money coming from? Where is that? When we're in we're all struggling to pay our bills. Where is $1.5 billion US dollars coming to actually advance digital inclusion? I mean, it's just, yeah. Where are we now? Let's have a look. Now, I just want to talk about the chickens, because they say that there's we know that way back before the summer they were manufacturing avian flu viruses, avian flu, the vaccines. Sorry, my brain's gone this afternoon. Vaccines. To cover the eventuality of some sort of pandemic, some bird pandemic. And of course, we then get the whole registering of chickens on the 1st of October. And also on the 1st of October, we had the Bird Flu Summit, the International Bird Flu Summit, where they addressed the pressing concerns surrounding the recent developments in avian flu. What was that?
That's not going to fly.
yeah, exactly. Well, one would hope. This is what we just have to be aware of. That's the only reason I'm flagging it up. With the emergence of a highly virulent strain of bird flu affecting both cattle and humans, this imperative that we come together to discuss preparedness and response strategies in the future. And they had a comprehensive agenda packed with breakout sessions of more than 15 in all. And the topics were mass fatality management planning, surveillance and data management, preparing community strategies, local...
Event 201 Mark 2.
Well, this is why I mentioned Event 201, because literally, you had the... prior to that, you had the meeting in Geneva, and then a few months later, you had Event 201. With this, they had the Summit of the Future. Days later, they had the Bird Flu Summit. And again, it's that whole, fear-based, let's just scare the bejesus out of everyone. And again, it's, school-based planning, business-based planning, emergency response management, command and control management. I mean, all of this is just absolutely ridiculous. And they will try it again, I swear, because we've got that thing happening, the health bill being trialled in consultation for Northern Ireland. They're definitely planning something, and we have to be aware of the machinations, because it's all, again, it's COVID Mark II, and it won't work. It won't work, and we have to be so aware that it won't work. And again, we've got all the whole hate speech, disinformation. Oppressed people have historically overcome censorship through various creative and resilient strategies. Underground publishing, we've got a whole history of overcoming censorship underground. We need to work at that. We need to be clever and strategic. I think we know, and again, it's same as 1984. Newspeak, the official language of Oceania, which is the UK, it replaces standard English and is used to promote the ideas of INGSOC, which is English socialism. It's the same as National Socialism. Vocabulary words that could express ideas contrary to the INGSOC were eliminated from the language, and communitarianism is all about language as well. So, from the language, so they would not even possess the power to express their disloyalty. How can you fight for freedom if you don't know what it is? And this is what they're trying to bring in, is this kind of new speak. And then you've got Antonio Guterres on hate speech. He's the Secretary General of the United Nations. He's a very angry man. He says, the world's boiling. The proliferation of hate and lies in the digital space is causing grave global harm. Now it's fueling conflict, death and destruction. Oh my gosh, he's very dramatic. Now it's threatening democracy and human rights. Now it's undermining public health and climate action. I mean, this is just unbelievable. So you've now got, misinformation, they're saying, is undermining public health and climate action. So the thing is that, we've got Mariana Spring here, and, she's doing, I haven't heard from her for a while. She's doing a lot of stuff with, misinformation, disinformation. The thing is that, you shut down free speech, like this crowd here, Stroud Solidarity. you shut down free speech, you have no freedom. And we have to really, really fight for our voices. And so I'm going to kind of wrap up there. Learn who rules over you. Simply find out who you are, who you're not allowed to criticise. That's a really good one. Find out who you aren't allowed to criticise to know who your enemies are. And more than anything, know who you are. Use your instincts, your intuition, your insights. You know, all of this is how we know what is right and what is wrong. We've all got that inner compass, all of us. And we have to use it more and more these days, because with AI, you don't know what's real and what isn't when you're looking at the mainstream media or the alternative media. As Gemma was saying, we have to literally find our truth within us and follow our truth. And that's where I'll end it. Thank you very much.
Come on, love, take a bow. Take a little curtsy. That's Sandi Adams.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And a lovely note to end that on, of all that information. It's almost information cascade, information overload of like what we're up against, but it doesn't mean we can't defeat it, not by a long, long way. We're going to roll through the rest of this afternoon, so it's a 10-minute comfort break now, because it's rather warm in here. If you'd like to go to the loo.